Welcome to episode 4 of the Colossal Color Comparison Series. In this episode, we're going to start looking at yellow ochre. Before we start, I do have to apologize for my pronunciations. I just had braces put in this week, so my pronunciations might be a little bit off. Apparently, the speech will come back as the weeks go on. So thank you for your patience with my pronunciations. So in this episode, we're going to start looking at the yellow ochre, and we have 10 colors to look at. Yellow ochre is one of those colors where pretty much all brands have yellow ochre. I haven't come across a brand that doesn't have yellow ochre. So Quo and Da Vinci do their own yellow ochre. Unfortunately, I couldn't fit it in with the budget of this series, so I do apologize for not having these two colors. But let's have a look at the 10 beautiful yellow ochres we have in front of us. We have the washes of these colors in each brand. And I would say in general, yellow ochre, unlike the phthalo turquoise we had in the previous episodes, don't come with a huge variety in color variations or name variations, so they look pretty similar and their names are usually yellow ochre. The only exception to the name is Quo's one, which is yellow ochre natural, and then Mission Gold's yellow ochre number 1. Now they have a yellow ochre number 2 as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about the difference between the two and how you have to be very careful which version you buy. So there isn't a huge range in hue. I would say yellow ochre has a wider variations in characteristics more than hue across the different brands. So for example, some brands go on very smoothly and it has no texture at all, such as the Holbein one, Schmincke's one, Winsor & Newton one, M. Graham and Van Gogh all go on very smooth, very little granulation. Whereas other brands have a lot of texture to them, such as the Daniel Smith's one, Sennelier's one, Mission Gold's one, Jackson's Art and Cass Art's one. They all have a little bit more texture to them than the smoother brands. So we have a choice on texture depending on what kind of texture you're looking for. In terms of rewet, all brands rewet really well. Even the Sennelier's one, which in the last two colors I've really struggled with because it has a lot of honey in it and it rewets really well, but it kind of rewets too well for me because I'm not used to honey. I didn't have that problem with the yellow ochre. I say it was more similar in the rewetability to other brands, and it also wasn't as gloopy as the other two Sennelier colors I've tried so far. Yellow ochres tend to come in one of two pigments, either PY43, which is a more common one, and PY42. PY43 brands are Daniel Smith, Sennelier, Winsor & Newton, Quo, M. Graham, Da Vinci, Jackson's Art and Cass Arts. The less common PY42 brands are Holbein, Schmincke and Van Gogh. Now the odd one out in this selection is the Mission Gold's yellow ochre number 1. You'll notice that all the other brands are single pigment. Yellow ochre number 1 by Mission Gold isn't. It is a combination of PY42 and PY150. This surprised me a lot that they chose to go with PY150 because that is nickel azo yellow. Nickel azo yellow is a very bright yellow that is highly staining, kind of the opposite of a yellow ochre pigment, which is more muted and not as staining. So I'm very surprised by this, and you'll see in the next episode how much havoc that azo yellow plays. What's really interesting is that Mission Gold actually has a yellow ochre number 2, which is a single pigment of PY42, and this is why I wanted to do this series based on name colors so we can highlight pitfalls like this. So I don't know about you, but when I see a color between like yellow ochre number 1 and yellow ochre number 2, I would assume that number 1 is the more traditional version that everyone's looking for, and yellow ochre number 2 being like a little bit more different color because it's like this alternative version of the yellow ochre. However, in Mission Gold, it's the other way around. The yellow ochre number 2 is the more traditional version of yellow ochre, and yellow ochre number 1 is the weird yellow ochre with azo yellow. So if you are going for Mission Gold and you are looking for a more traditional version of a yellow ochre, then do go for the yellow ochre number 2, okay? And don't go for the number 1. A lot of brands have a variety of other yellow ochres that they offer in the range as well. For example, Daniel Smith has burgundy yellow ochre, which is PY43. Sennelier has 3 different other ochres that you could choose from. Gold ochre, which is PY119, PY42 and PY83. Light yellow ochre, PY42 with PY150. That's like the azo yellow version that Mission Gold's yellow ochre number 1 is. And then French ochre, which is PY3, PY150, PB23 and PBR7. I don't know why we need a color that has 4 colors. Schmincke has yellow raw ochre, which is PY42 and PY43. Transparent ochre by PY42 and titanium gold ochre, which is PBR24. So if you do want varieties in yellow ochre, but you want them in single pigments, then I recommend going for Schmincke because they have the widest range of single pigment yellow ochre alternatives. The Winsor & Newton has yellow ochre light, which is PY43. And then finally on the bottom row, we just have one brand, the Mission Gold, the yellow ochre number 2 that we've already spoken of. In terms of prices, and I take all my prices as always from Jackson's, and I will leave a link down below to where you can get each one of these colors. So this is UK prices. If you are interested in US prices, a very helpful Patreon called Christina Todd has kindly found out the prices for each brand for the first 2 episodes over on Patreon. So if you are interested in how the US prices compare, do check out the Patreon posts over on patreon.com/Kano. It's incredibly interesting to actually see how different brands are the cheapest and the most expensive over in the US, and the Da Vinci prices just makes me cry because it's like, well, it's so affordable over there. So the most expensive artist quality brand, not surprisingly, is the Core at 95 pence per milliliter. The cheapest one in artist quality is the Jackson's one at 27 pence per milliliter. So almost Core is 4 times the price of the Jackson's one. Jackson's one is 27 pence per milliliter, and if the theory stands, if that Sennelier and Jackson's the same paint, and Sennelier sells theirs for 41 pence per milliliter, then Jackson's is a really great deal. Van Gogh, being the student quality color, is a little bit cheaper than the rest at 20 pence per milliliter. With yellow ochre, you do get a wide range of transparency according to the brands, all the way from the transparent colors, according to Daniel Smith and Van Gogh, to the semi-transparent, to the semi-opaque colors, to the very opaque colors. And we can see that in our transparency test. This is of course the transparency lift and glazing sheet, but just like the last episode, I did do swatches on black paper to see the transparency of each color. As you can see, a huge wide range of transparency, the most transparent colors being Winsor & Newton and Daniel Smith. I know that Denise from In Liquid Color loves the Daniel Smith yellow ochre because it's the most transparent yellow ochre. And then you get the semi-transparent, semi-opaque colors such as Schmincke, Holbein, M. Graham, Van Gogh and Mission Gold. Mission Gold is on the more opaque side of the semi-opaque, semi-transparent split. And then we have the very opaque colors, the Senneliers, the Jacksons and the Cass Arts. If I had to pick that, I would pick cassats being the most opaque. Now, yellow ochre traditionally is made from basically what you find in the earth. So they are going to be more opaque. So if you are looking for a more traditional version of yellow ochre, then I would suggest these 3 brands. But if you are looking for a very transparent yellow ochre, I would recommend either Daniel Smith or Winsor Newton. And if you're looking for somewhere in between, these 4 brands plus Mission Gold is a good bet for you. I think yellow ochre so far has been the most varied in transparency we've had. And I personally didn't know that yellow ochres came in such a wide range of transparency until I did this test. Now let's take a look at how easy a colour is to lift. And most yellow ochres are easy to lift, with the exception of 3 colours that might give you some trouble if you do a lot of lifting. And those colors are Holbein and Schminke. You can see that compared to the neighboring colors, it really didn't lift that much at all, particularly Schminke. And it could be that it's because these 2 appear 42 and the others appear 43, but Van Gogh's yellow ochre is PY 42 as well, and that lifts okay. Could be because it's a student grade one. It's a tentative theory at best. The biggest problem though is the Mission Gold. Because of that azo yellow, which is a highly staining yellow, when you take the yellow ochre off, the PY42 off, you get left with a very yellowy stained paper. So compared to, say, all the other colors, you get left with a kind of a glowy yellow patch, which if you're looking for a traditional yellow ochre, that's not what you want to happen to your painting. So again, I know I've said it before, but do go for the yellow ochre number 2 rather than the yellow ochre number 1 if you're going for Mission Golds. The rest of the colours lifted really nicely, particularly the Daniel Smith one lifts almost back to white, but that's not surprising because Daniel Smith's one is actually quite low in tinting strength, which you will see in the next episode. In terms of glazing, as I always say, glazing is a lot easier if you have a high staining, high transparent colours. Yellow ochres don't tend to be highly staining, but we see that some colours are very transparent. And Daniel Smith one glazes beautifully. You really see the difference in layers in this swatch. Holbein was pretty good too. Surprising is that Winsor Newton isn't as clear in the layers as the Daniel Smith one. It seems to be prone to cauliflowering, and that fuzzes up the edges a little bit. So if you do a lot of glazing with your yellow ochre, then I would highly recommend Daniel Smith. Other colors did pretty good too. The Holbein one is nice. Schminke's one's nice. Surprisingly, Jackson's one is pretty nice too, as well as Van Gogh's. If I had to pick top 3 for glazing, I would go for Daniel Smith, Holbein and Schminke. And the worst 3, I would say, is Sennelier, M. Graham, and I'm going to go for Cass Ars, only because I've already gone on about how bad the yellow ochre number 1 is by Mission Gold, that I hope nobody touches this colour if they're going for a traditional yellow ochre colour anyway. In the next episode, we're going to look at the gradated wash, where we see the difference in granulation a lot more, the salt wash, as well as the color mixes, where you'll see that this being a weak tinting strength one and this having an azo is going to play a lot of havoc with your color mixing if you are expecting to use a traditional yellow ochre color. Which color is your favorite so far? I actually don't have a yellow ochre favorite, so I'm going to reserve judgment until the next episode. But do let me know what yellow ochre you like to use in your own art practice. Since yellow ochre seems to have a huge variety in just characteristics, it'll be a very interesting conversation to have about why people like certain yellow ochres. If this video was interesting and useful to you, then please do give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!